Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the JournalismAI Festival. My name is Mattia. I am the project manager of JournalismAI, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to session number 12, I think, of this week. We started the JournalismAI Festival on Monday, and today's day 4, and we're going to go until tomorrow. So we have 6 more fantastic sessions for you, and this one especially I'm really excited to host and introduce the speakers in a moment. The JournalismAI Festival is a celebration of the most exciting developments at the intersection of journalism and artificial intelligence. It's the second edition of the festival, and for us at JournalismAI, it's an incredible opportunity to bring together our global community and continue learning together how artificial intelligence can be used to improve journalism worldwide and better serve our audiences. The team at JournalismAI is powered by Polis, the journalism think tank at the London School of Economics and Political Science, and we have the support of the Google News Initiative. We have been doing research since 2019 and also creating training programs and opportunities for journalists to learn more about the potential of AI and machine learning. And we've also been hosting some collaborative initiatives with journalists from across the world working together to experiment with AI. At journalismai.info, you can find everything about our work and all the relevant links. And they especially encourage you to go there and take a look at the AI Journalism Starter Pack, which we published a couple of weeks back, which is, we think, a fantastic resource for journalists worldwide to get started with AI, understand what are the main use cases, and answer some of the most common questions that we receive from our audiences across the world. Ask your questions here on YouTube if you want to enjoy the festival at best. So we have been live streaming the entire festival on YouTube, where you're listening to right now, and in the live chat that I've seen very lively already for this session, you can ask all the questions to the speakers. Don't wait to the last minute, so just drop them in there at any point during the conversation. I will make sure to get to them once it's time. And please join the community on Telegram as well. We'd love to have you. It's at t.me/journalismai, and we have a thriving global community of more than 500 media professionals and innovators discussing and learning together about how to use AI for journalism. If you share content on social media about this festival, if you want to share what you're learning, please use the hashtag JournalismAI. And don't forget that you can always go back at any time to journalismaifestival.com to check the program of the festival and see what more sessions are coming up later today and tomorrow. If you don't receive yet our normally monthly newsletter, a bit more often coming to you these days than monthly, I encourage you to sign up. You'll find the link on the festival website, on our own website, and on everywhere else where you find our information. There's a bet going on within the team. My team thinks we're going to reach 4,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm skeptical, so how about you prove me wrong and help us get to that number? Last comment before I introduce the speakers is an encouragement for you all to be open, be curious, and be kind. This is how we suggest everyone to enjoy this festival. We're here to learn together. We're learning to learn from each other about a complex topic, that is AI. There's no such thing as a stupid question. So anytime you have a doubt or you want to know more about something, feel free to ask us and ask the speakers during the session. We have 2 more sessions coming up today after this one. So I just want to remind you at 2:30 p.m., Holding AI Accountable, the reporter's take, and the time is GMT in London, where we are based. And then at the end of the day, to close us off with a fantastic lineup of speakers from the US talking about bridging AI ethics and journalistic standards. But now, finally, I feel like I've been speaking a bit too much more than often, but we're here with Allan and Amanda from Code for Africa, and they are appearing on screen next to me right now. And we're really looking forward to hear from them about a tool that they've been working on recently to combat disinformation online using machine learning. So I'm really excited to have this session. Code for Africa has been a fantastic partner for JournalismAI from the start. So I'm really pleased to leave the floor to Allan and Amanda to introduce their work and introduce themselves. So welcome to have you. Really excited for this. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mattia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mattia.
Hi everyone, my name is Allan Cheboi. Today we are going to discuss about using AI to battle disinformation and how we're using one of the tools called CivicSignal, primarily developed by MediaCloud as part of MIT, and has been replicated on, to actually look at information on the African continent. As I mentioned, my name is Allan Cheboi. I'm a Senior Investigations Manager at Code for Africa. I lead a team called the iLab, which is short for Investigative Lab, which is also part of the ANSIRE network, which is the African Network and Centers for Investigative Reporting. The team is mainly comprised of data scientists, analysts, and technologists across 8 African countries, and we work primarily to use forensic research and data analysis to investigate using data and telling stories on the African continent. Previously, I used to work with KPMG as a cybercrime investigator and forensic audit manager, and I'm also a fellow of the African School of Internet Governance. Over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Allan. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Strydom. I'm a Senior Program Manager at Code for Africa, and I head up the CivicSignal team. So CivicSignal uses machine learning and natural language processing, and we monitor and map media systems or media ecosystems and media organizations and civic tech organizations on the continent. Previously, I was managing editor for the African Network of Centers for Investigative Reporting, and also have a background in digital media.
Thank you, Amanda, for the intro. So we work for Code for Africa, which is the continent's largest indigenous network of civic technology and digital investigations lab. We operate across 22 African countries at the moment with full-time staff, almost 100 full-time staff across all those 22 African countries. Code for Africa incubates a couple of teams. The first team that you can see on your screen is PesaCheck. PesaCheck is one of the largest fact-checking organizations on the African continent, currently with foot across 13 African countries. The other team is the iLab, the team that I lead, which is part of the African Network and Centers for Investigative Reporting, covering or supporting newsrooms across 22 African countries. And Amanda, as he mentioned, works for the CivicSignal and Research team, which uses artificial intelligence and other machine learning tools to track and analyze millions of articles across the continent. So I think I'll introduce Amanda to actually tell us what motivated them to create this particular tool. Over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Allan. So when we started working on this on MediaCloud, we realized 2 very big problems. There was no central database of actual digital media and civic tech organizations in Africa that helped us provide information to partners who wanted to partner with organizations within the continent, rather. So no tool that collected media, and then there was also no tool that actually collected media info from most African countries in order to actually lead media monitoring, to find trends, to monitor possible foreign influence, or to build localized lexicons that track specific topics. And so it created these sort of data deserts, which meant that large parts of the continent just weren't covered when we were doing research there. So after doing the research, we discovered that MediaCloud would help put this together, and it needed to be dynamic enough for us in order to add different languages or to scale it pretty quickly, and not require a massive team to manage the tool as we're small and trying to move as fast as possible. And MediaCloud offered that to us, and we could build our own standalone iteration of that. It helped us also to look at monitoring media to find around specific topics such as LGBTQI issues and possible foreign influence operations and disinformation publishers and networks. So to tell you a little bit more about the tool, CivicSignal MediaCloud focuses specifically on media in Africa, and it's a way to monitor media and analyze content and to map digital news media coverage of current events. It's completely a standalone instance of MediaCloud, and which was built by, as Allan had mentioned earlier, it was built by a team at MIT, and which our local technologists within Code for Africa have adapted to suit our needs. The tool uses RSS feeds of validated sites that scrapes articles, and then the sources are sorted according to country, and we currently do track 54 country collections, which is roughly about 11.8 million articles in our database starting from December 2020. So the process that was used to start the project was to scrape as many media and civic tech lists as we could find to actually start building the database. But we had to take a step back really to figure out what constitutes as what counts as a media organization. Would a small blog that publishes news count? Do we include things that we know are known disinformation publishers? Would a news aggregator distort mappings and findings that we have? So there were very, very big questions that we had to ask even before we could start collecting the data and looking where we could find. Of course, this becomes a very labor heavy task because we're now monitoring 54 countries. We're trying to find many sources of data, which then all have to be verified and checked whether they do meet the requirements. Of course, when we started working on that, we also then realized, sure, we don't actually have a full idea of what the media ecosystem looks like, digital or otherwise. So it sort of created the backbone for our media database. And we could reuse some of the data, and so reuse some of the work that had already been put into building this media system, media ecosystem. So decoding the narratives, what we're now trying to do is using machine learning and natural language processing in order to create dashboards. So firstly, let me start over. It's free to use, and we are always adding new capabilities to it, such as new languages, so that it can track more sources. It uses Boolean search, where we set up dashboards with keywords that we can track and monitor. It also looks at the attention of topics over time, and it identifies really which words people are using to talk about specific topics. And then that in turn can serve as warning flags for possible topics our analysts do need to explore. And so while this tool does a lot of the manual work, a lot of the kind of machine learning stuff for it, we definitely need use of the analysts to then make sense of what is the data that's being provided to us. Once the Boolean searches have been put up and the dashboard is running and regular check-ins are doing, it starts breaking it down slightly more granularly. So you'd be able to see things like trends, you'd be able to see time spent on an article. You'd also be able to see the deeper narratives and understanding of the information that's shared. So by doing that, you'd be able to download the CSV files that link to the actual the articles that are being the news organizations that are being spoken about, as well as a link to the lists of articles that are published. And that very quickly starts creating a story for us: is who are the big publishers of the news? What are the possible agendas that they are publishing? Which trends are picking up and which trends are dropping off? And also then why are these certain trends happening? So it's very much a tool to build and find deeper information for narratives that can then be passed on to our different teams, such as the iLab, to do deeper analysis. So currently we are mapping, currently we're tracking just over 2,000 real-time sites, and the database, as I mentioned earlier, stands at about 11 million articles that we track live, and that gets updated daily as part of our tool. Allan, I'll hand back to you to look at some of our use cases currently.
Thank you, Amanda, for the explanation. So as Amanda mentioned, the iLab is one of the primary departments within Code for Africa that uses the tool to actually do the actual research. And we have a couple of use cases that we actually use the tool to give us insights on. And one of the key things that we do is we share access of this particular tool, and we train a couple of journalists and newsrooms on the African continent to actually use the tool and several other tools dealing with social media monitoring so that they are able to cover the entire information environment. So one of the key capabilities of this CivicSignal tool is that because it collects media and articles primarily from the African continent, you're able to actually use the tool to derive local insights and narratives from the African continent. So the tool is one of the tools that we primarily use at the iLab when we want to find some of the narratives that are being shared within the African continent. As an example, one of our latest research pieces looking at how the Central Africa Republic's media are reporting on Russia was quite instrumental through MediaCloud. Several other things that we do is MediaCloud has the capability of tracking the timeline of how the articles and coverage of particular narratives and particular topics within the African continent. And as you can see on your screen, we are now able to track the pulse on actually different jurisdictions. So on your screen, you can see a comparative analysis between headlines that are mentioning coverage of Russia within the Ethiopian environment, Malian environment, Niger. And what is important is that whenever you see spikes on the number of mentions of the topic that you're interested in, then of course the team now gets to dig in deep and identify why do we have a spike in media coverage across this particular jurisdiction. It also allows us to do comparative analysis. So as you can see, we have different countries, and of course when you're looking at a topic, for example COVID-19, you'd be able to quickly pick up which country is publishing a little bit more about this particular topic as compared to the other African countries. The other thing that we use CivicSignal to do is to map networks within the African continent. So this primarily means that we might have newsrooms that are working together to push content. We might also have research that you want to accomplish through identifying networks or coordinated sharing of information. So what we primarily do, like for example, you can see on your screen a screenshot of research that we did in Niger, covering disinformation in Niger during their elections. And CivicSignal enabled us to map what is happening on the ground through online sources. So what we know is that the media always publishes events as they happen on the ground. So just using CivicSignal, you're able to pinpoint, based on the spikes that you see on narratives being shared, you're able to pinpoint what are the key events that are happening within that particular country. And the platform looks like this. So this is basically what Amanda referred to as using Boolean queries. So as a researcher, you might be able to curate a couple of keywords or a couple of terms that you can be able to use to filter or to arrive at the information that you need on the platform. So Amanda mentioned that the platform is actually collecting a lot of data. So that kind of data and sifting through that kind of data is not as an easy task. You actually have to create keywords, and you're able to point the tool at the exact information that you need. You're able to filter based on the timeline that you want. As you can see, this is one of the examples that we used during the recent COP26 summit, and we were part of the team that was covering disinformation and influence operations that will affect the summit, and especially looking at the African continent. And we know South Africa had a very big voice in that particular conversation. So we were able to use CivicSignal to track what is the media reporting about that particular conference. The other thing that we also are able to tell from CivicSignal itself is you're able to tell the attention over time based on the narrative or the topic that you're covering. So as I mentioned, spikes of course give you an idea that there is much more coverage of that conversation in this particular jurisdiction, and you're able to dig in a little bit deeper to understand why do we have those spikes. You're also able to see a sample of articles that are published related to the topic that you're searching. As you see, it gives you several articles based on recently published data. And also using our named entity recognition models through CivicSignal, we are able to actually extract the entities that are mentioned within the dataset. So if you're looking at, for example, COP26 narratives in South Africa, you realize that the top entities mentioned there are the ones on your screen, top organizations that are mentioned within the conversation, and that enables you to actually profile who is communicating more, or which organizations, or who are the influencers based on the narratives that I'm looking at, or the topics that I'm looking at. We also correlate the same with social media data at the end of the day, and it is important to do that because at the end of the day, you always want to understand the reach of media publications related to a particular topic, and also how much impact or what are some of the insights you can get from social media information as compared to the media information. Because we do understand that social media is actually citizen reporting, so you might actually be able to pinpoint what is the media saying versus what is the social media saying at the end of the day. And finally, okay, this is second last slide, and we are able to also pinpoint a couple of themes that the topic that you're searching for are related to. So this is an example of a search that we are looking at the effects of the pandemic on clean water in Africa. And one of the key things is that we realize that there are a couple of themes that you'll pick up based on the CivicSignal machine learning and AI-based extraction. So some of the themes you could pick up on that were, of course, the conversations were mainly about water, but you could see that we also had conversations on the African continent about medicine and health because it's related to COVID-19. We had some publications related to finances, diseases, and conditions, and that way you're able to actually tell what is relevant as part of the research that I am doing. And finally, of course, as we mentioned, fighting disinformation is one of the key responsibilities of Code for Africa. And one of the key things that we are able to use CivicSignal to do is to pinpoint which are the claims that are made related to topics that we are looking at. Recently, we are looking at COVID-19, of course, because COVID-19 is one of the biggest things that have happened in the world over the last 5 years. And you could actually tell, and of course, many people look at social media, say that social media are the only ones that are spreading disinformation, but we do understand that the media can also get it wrong at the end of the day. So we do empower either journalists or even researchers to try and use this particular tool to find insights on what the media is reporting, and also whenever you just want to do your own research at the end of the day. I'll allow Amanda to talk about the research that we do using CivicSignal, and also the mapping we partner with the Global Disinformation Index, and also to cover some of the challenges.
Thanks, Allan. So one of the, we were speaking a little bit earlier about one of the research projects that we managed to do with CivicSignal, and Allan shared some examples. So one of the things that we have done as CivicSignal as well is publish a disinformation risk assessment that we did in partnership with the Global Disinformation Index. So we've done 2 of them within South Africa and 1 within Kenya. And this really looks at 20, for Kenya specifically, we looked at 29 domains and within their media, and saw how many were sort of maximum at risk and minimum, right through to minimum risk. And that really helps us guide on CivicSignal when we're looking at, or CivicSignal MediaCloud rather, when we're looking at which sites are possibly spreading disinformation, whether we need to go and double check what the narrative is that they're spreading, as well as what their agenda is. And that in turn then helps us guide newsrooms and what are the steps you can take in order to avoid publishing disinformation, or to certain editorial policies that need to be put in place in order to help combat disinformation. So it gives us information on the one end that sort of feeds in, but on the other end helps us understand a little bit broader about the actual media market. Next slide, please, Allan. So then challenges and opportunities. I'm going to speak a little bit about the challenges that we faced in building the tool. You would have heard earlier we spoke about the difficulty in setting up something where there is a big desert data, or data desert rather, and covering Africa is no different. There are 2,000 languages roughly in Africa, and so the availability of local languages is so difficult to track, and to build NLP models that can quickly classify content is a major sort of challenge that we face. And so it means doing things in much smaller iterations, and trying to use our local teams really to help us build that as fast as possible. The next problem that we face is, of course, the adoption by newsrooms. So currently newsrooms on the continent and probably worldwide don't really have built-in workflows and tool pools, or like talent pools rather, to help to understand and to use tools that are made available. And so often that kind of research option that we provide, and that tools that exist just aren't being used because no one quite knows how and where to build it into a system. The next challenge that we really faced was, because we were putting this together from scratch, it was finding the right teams. Who are the people that we want working on the tool? Who are the people that we need to get on a team that would make the tool work as fast as possible, but to also make it understandable and usable for people with a range of journalists right through to sort of academic researchers, and that would make it easy to use and easy to understand. Of course, another problem that we face is the internet shutdowns. So when a country's internet is shut down and there is no actual publishing of media, it becomes a data gap, and so that could in turn, besides making information difficult to get hold of within a country, it also gives us skewed data, and we often aren't able to tell exactly what happened and why there's a lack of information there. So one of the other, as I had mentioned earlier, the way that the tool verifies information is by using news sites' RSS feeds. And often these, which relies then on the newsroom or on the news organization to maintain their RSS feeds. So we do every now and again find that we have a drop of information because we're relying on news organizations to keep that updated and keep those maintained. However, with our partners, we are able to flag, hey, by the way, your RSS feed isn't working, and perhaps you can take a look at that. Our last big challenge that I would mention is definitely server space and costs. It becomes a very big project that you take on, and the more data that's being collected, the costs to host data becomes a lot more significant. And I think that's one of the big reasons why working with us or collaborating with us is really useful, so that each organization isn't trying to build its own media monitoring tool and its own machine learning tool, but really can pool resources and work alongside us to use the tools that are already being created. Allan, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. So I'll discuss some of the opportunities that we see as Amanda mentioned, it's a continuous improvement process for development of this particular tool. And some of the opportunities that we see in the pipeline is, number one, addition of more African sources. So we do understand that new media keeps cropping up on the continent. We've not covered the entire landscape in Africa. So we are not saying we're ingesting every media house in media content in Africa, but we do have a large percentage of that, and we continue to build that as we continue to acquire new sources. The other opportunity that we see is actually using byline analysis. And what that means is that the bylines from individual journalists and individual publishers within newsrooms are usually a really interesting bit of data point for us to actually use in our research. So we intend to also include the development of or collection of bylines from the news outlets, so that researchers across the continent and even journalists themselves can be able to filter by a particular individual or a particular publisher or journalist. The other thing that we find within the pipeline of our development for CivicSignal is we would probably want to introduce social media reach and just determining how far did these articles that we are looking at actually go when it comes to social media. So one of the key things that we always want to know is, yes, I published my my article, but how many shares, how much reach am I receiving from some of my articles? So we are trying to introduce that to CivicSignal so that we are able to collect and we are able to provide more insights. The last thing that we wanted to do is, of course, is collaborating with other organizations. Of course, collaboration is one thing that powers the research and also the use of these tools that we develop. So, of course, as a call to action, we are calling on everyone to use the tool, try it out, and then reach out to us and tell us, are there any improvements that you can see, any opportunities that we can utilize, and do you think that there are any collaborative opportunities that probably we can work together on? So yeah, thank you everyone, and back to you, Matthias.
I'll just add one thing there, Allan, just to say that in terms of collaboration, of course, if you want to use the tool and you're not entirely sure, please do get in touch with us to be trained on it. Like, we do offer the ability to use us to do the research for you and to teach you how to use the tool. So don't feel like you need to log on and know exactly how it works. Yes, that's it.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, Allan, for the great presentation. I think that's a wonderful point that you're making at the end. I was going to ask you about how to recommend people to collaborate. So that's a great point to end on. There's already one question in the chat, and I'm getting to that in a moment. And I encourage everyone listening at home to share more of your questions on the YouTube live chat or on Telegram as well. If you're a part of the community there, we really want to hear from you. Just, the the pleasure of being the moderator allows me to start first with the Q&A part. So I wanted to link to the element of collaboration that you mentioned a lot. And obviously, like everyone knows by now, it's a big part, of course, of how we do things at JournalismAI as well. So it's a topic dear to us. And I was very curious when you were mentioning the use cases in the first part of the presentation. You were talking about a project in the Central African Republic, another one reporting on Niger, and so on. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about how you may partner with organizations on the ground as well to bring the power of your tools and of CivicSignal to journalists in the various African countries, which an entire continent to cover. So I'm sure you have a lot of different experiences with collaborating with people on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I can speak to that. And so one of the key things that we do at Code for Africa is we do understand that we are not everywhere and we are not able to, of course, cover every jurisdiction. And also one of the key elements that is important is the local insights, right? Like you need someone who is in the country, someone who actually primarily does research in the country for you to be able to gain more insightful things, even from the tools and the data that we are collecting. So that is why we call on everyone, on every organizations that would want to partner in terms of doing individual researchers within each country in Africa or even jurisdictions within Africa. We partner with a number of organizations, civil society organizations, but majority of our partnerships are through newsrooms. So we primarily work with newsrooms because we do understand that they are the guardians of the information environment, right? And also we try to give them access to these tools so that they are able to quickly pinpoint what are some of the things that we need to be aware of, and also how do we do the research that we are supposed to be doing. I think one of the most successful things we've seen with CivicSignal is that, of course, when a journalist wants to write about a particular topic or about a particular narrative, one thing they always want to do is what has been published before and what are some of the research that are already available. So CivicSignal is a tool that gives you that capability because you'll now understand, I'm going to write about this story. What are some of the things that are available out there, published by my fellow journalists that we can use? So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Allan, for the very detailed answer. I appreciate that. Questions are flowing now on the chat, so I'll get to them right away. The first question comes from Jatin, who, about the misinformation and disinformation part, was asking if you have a way to track misinformation on closed messaging groups. And I guess I'm going to expand the question also a little bit to maybe ask you in general about what are the sources or the spaces where you look for examples of misinformation to then be able to act on that.
Yeah, just so to talk about that a little bit is the process of researching misinformation is quite complex because of all the things that are developing in that realm. So one of the key things we use is we try to cover all sources. So the primary sources is media using tools such as CivicSignal, but we also try to look at publicly available information on Facebook, on Twitter, for us to be able to map this information shared through that. When it comes to closed messaging platforms, it's actually a challenge. So of course, we do understand the privacy concerns and the privacy issues surrounding those applications. We've seen evidence of disinformation actually shifting from public Facebook and Twitter platforms to platforms such as WhatsApp, Telegram, and Signal. So one of the key things we do because of the privacy concerns is we do work with local people within the countries, right? Like, for example, we call them sentinels. So they are the sentinels in our countries. And what we do is we train them to join the WhatsApp groups or the Telegram groups. And it's as easy as using social media monitoring. We know that disinformation peddlers always post the links to those channels, such as Telegram groups or WhatsApp groups. They post them on Facebook so that they are able to pull people from Facebook. So we do research and we try to find those links, and then we get our local researchers to join those groups, and they're able to collect information. They're able to feed us some of the insights from the closed messaging platforms. We are hoping, of course, technologically we'll advance in a way that we'll be able to track it in a more large scale perspective, but that is the only thing we are doing at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Allan. Got so many questions right now, so I'm trying to keep on top of everything. So thank you, Berit, Mayruf, Kiprotic, for all the questions. I'll get into that soon. Next question is from a name that probably will be familiar to you. It comes from Justin, who is actually asking, how do you turn your investigative and analytic insights into real-world action, which takes away a question that I wanted to ask you, because I was going to ask related to this. In general, how do you measure your impact of your initiative? Like, what does it mean for CivicSignal for you to have a positive impact on the African media ecosystem?
I think Amanda can take that first.
I was about to hand it over to Allan to say, you talk. This is a very tricky question. So I think what we very much do is like look at the foreign influence ops and really to understand what are the trends, like what are people talking about within organizations or within the media, but then really also what voices are missing, what stories are missing, why is there, it's that sort of typical what we see on Twitter question is like, why is the media not reporting on this? And actually, that's a very good point. Why are some of the voices missing? Why are some of the stories missing? And really, that becomes a whole data point within itself and becomes something we really start tracking and can start building information around. Allan, I guess a little bit more about sort of your research dossiers that you do would be quite useful to point out here.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the other things that we do is as I mentioned, we primarily work through newsrooms, and the iLab is basically a research, or like we try out new tools, and then we actually share those capabilities with our partner newsrooms so that they're able to do the research on their end. So one of the key things in terms of making real world impact is that we share with, for any investigative research we do at the iLab, we share what we call data dossiers with our partner newsrooms, and they're able to tell stories based on that, on those data dossiers. So they're able to do additional research. So say, for example, if we are covering the effects of the pandemic on access to water in Africa, that is really important. So we actually work through newsrooms so that we are able to voice out the findings that we are getting at the end of the day and effect real world impact.
Thank you, Allan. I think the answer to this question, I think, was already replying in a sense to one of the questions that Kiprotic had on the chat. He was asking what has been the impact so far on the research and media community of these tools. So I know that partly what you just said answered this question, but I was wondering if there's anything that either of you wanted to add to that.
Well, I think it's certainly linked to further partnerships within, for instance, our covered research and oh, the name has just left me. The organization that we partnered with in order to expand on our own covered research data, for instance. I mean, Allan's team then also has done further looking at the CIR story, the CIR stories, for instance, and it kind of being used for proper research and very much. Sorry, the words that just left me. Sort of very much like influencing what news organizations write about and how, in order to give them the data to understand what the story actually is.
And just to add on that,
I don't know if you want to add to it.
Yeah, so I think one of the other important things is that after telling these stories, we expect impact. And one of the best ways to get impact is to actually effect policy changes within our African countries. So when it comes to disinformation, of course, the research we've done on disinformation and every other party that is covering disinformation and fake news on the continent, you'll see that now governments are even starting to take action. And it's because of these tools that we're developing to make our research efforts much easier that affect those policy changes within these particular countries. And it could be in any realm. It could be in environmental crime, for example, when you cover a story using that, and all the other realms that everyone is working on the continent.
Of course. There are a few technical questions as well, so let me see if we can get to those at the moment. So Berit is asking, you mentioned using NLP tools with many diverse languages is of course a challenge. So the question is, are you currently checking manually if certain results are accurate? And there's a follow-up to that too, which adds, or generally, how do you check that sentiment analysis keyword are good enough? So this touches upon the accuracy, of course, of algorithms and so on. How do you go about this? And I'm going to put back the first part of the question on screen.
Thank you. So that's a very good question. We, because we work in about 22 African countries and we work alongside other partners, we are able to actually check, is what is being said, or is what our trend is showing more or less on the right track, or have we completely misunderstood what it's telling us? So it very much relies on the human analyst. So while the data is provided to us by the tool, it relies on the human analyst to actually make sense of it and to see, like, what is being said here, what are we saying, and actually, and you know, I mean, the one question is it nonsense? But actually, is it something that is totally usable? So currently we work in English, French, and Arabic, and very soon we'll be rolling out it, and I think French as well. So I'm just trying to remember. Very soon it will be starting to add smaller, more local languages as our team has grown and can kind of provide us with that local knowledge to really build on it. So yes, the short answer is we do check manually to make sure that what we're talking about actually makes sense.
Thank you so much for that. We're approaching the end of the session, but there are still a few more questions that I would love to get to, if that's okay. So I see a question that is following up about the language part that you were just talking about, Amanda. So Maruf is asking, great tool, first of all, trying it out. The ask question is if there are any plans to include more language support, for example, in case of Ethiopia, or to grow other sources like Telegram news channels, which, let me expand the question in general to what is next. You mentioned some of the things on your slide that you hope to try out, but let's be also a bit imaginative. Like, if the technology continues developing and accelerates, what are your wishes for what the technology might allow you to do in the future?
I mean, you said we're at the end of our talk, so my wish list is endless. And I'm really hoping that the people that sort of from this talk, we can build up some partnerships who said, like, we'd really like to develop with you and kind of offer some of the expertise. So that's one sort of cheeky response to that. But my big thing really is to understand the kind of the wish list would be to incorporate social media. That would be a big work for us, but of course it relies on social. It relies on platforms to give us access to that back end information, and that's often that's the kind of information that's the data that's valuable. So getting access to that is often very difficult. That would be a big one for us in terms of speaking to kind of closed groups. That's, you know, also a dream, but I think internationally it's a big problem for us to monitor, and which is why, as Allan mentioned, you know, we rely on sentinels. But in a dream world, that would be something that our tool could use. But I mean, our tool would be able to use, but really possibly on more of a you know, what's open and what's closed information, and because also the information that's available isn't necessary, especially if you're going into social media. Some of it you would have to ask, like, what are the ethics of someone's you know, someone's question within a closed organization, within a closed chat, and what are the, like, ethically, if we're looking at encrypted information, what, you know, should we be sharing that? Is that something that should be made available? And at what point does it get declared that, sure, you think that your Telegram group is encrypted, but actually, you know, it is there's sort of a backdoor that goes in it. So it's like, it's a dream, but ethically, we would suddenly need to start facing or to start asking a lot of questions. But just to add to my wish list, and I did say that earlier, it really is to grow into more and more languages that we possibly can, and to get sources. Like, if you know, or if you can see there's a news source that we're so obviously missing, when you're using the tool, is let us know. You know, send us a message on our Slack community or on Telegram, where Allan and I are both there, to say, you know, why is this information not there? And we'd love to talk more about it, or let us know, you know, you'd like to build a part of our tool with us, and we're there. We're happy to help.
Brilliant. Amanda, Allan, thank you so much for this session. It was great having you. Before I let you go, then just a reminder for anyone who may want to collaborate and find out more about your work, any link or any email addresses we should get people to?
Sure, you can mail us at help@codeforafrica.org, or no, sorry, not help hello@codeforafrica.org. You can also follow us on Twitter. It's just code and the number 4 Africa, the numerical 4 and then Africa. And then we'll make the slide available to you, Mattia, to also share the link on Telegram, where you'll be able to get hold of both Allan and I directly, sort of on Twitter and LinkedIn, to ask any questions. And just to say again, like, we'd love to hear from you. Please do send us any questions or requests.
Amazing. Thank you, Amanda. Then we will be sharing the slides. We will be sharing all the links with the community. So thank you again for the presentation. Thanks for everyone who has been following the session at home. And very sorry if I didn't get maybe to a couple of the questions. There were many of them. So I really, really appreciate the engagement on this. Allan, Amanda, once again, thank you for joining us. This was a fantastic session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
again to our wonderful speakers, and thanks for my team, as always, behind the scenes, making everything happen. Just before we go, a quick reminder of what's waiting for you in the program of the JournalismAI Festival today. So we have at 2:30 p.m. GMT, so London time, a fantastic session on holding AI accountable with some of the best tech reporters in the business from Politico Europe, The Markup, Bavarian Radio, and the Pulitzer Center. So really, really looking forward to this session, and I encourage everybody to join and follow the conversation. And then later today, we're going to end with another session with the partnership on AI. That brings us to the end of this specific session. So another thank you to our wonderful speakers, Allan and Amanda, and the whole team of Code for Africa for the great work they're doing across the continent. That closes off for me. So thank you again for tuning in to the JournalismAI Festival, and I hope to see you online again for the later session of the day. Thank you.